I've said it a lot on this channel before that I think all authentic art comes out of who we are as individuals. And that means that getting to know ourselves is the only way that we can be deliberate about what we want to say and what we want to produce and put out into the world. And that getting to know ourselves takes an investment of time. I think the way we live our lives today, it can be very easy to be disconnected from ourselves, and that will mean that our art will suffer and we'll feel like there's no direction to what we're doing. Because as we're chasing around trying to fulfill to-do lists or catch up on the bills that need to be paid, it's really difficult to carve out space and time to take that step back to be able to see the bigger picture. I learned this a while ago, and I try and get really deliberate about creating space to sit and do a lot of thinking. Not necessarily with the agenda to have to create something, but sometimes just to read a book, just to sit and think about something. I really enjoy reading about psychology and anthropology and history as well, because it situates me as an individual in the bigger context of who human beings are and what they're trying to do. I've also been to therapy on and off for years, and it's not to respond to some crisis or because things are falling apart. It's because I want to be a more deliberate artist and to know myself better. And I found it really helpful to sit across a room from somebody who can act as an objective mirror, showing me the lies I'm telling about myself and helping me to dig a bit deeper and get to know who I am. And it's all these times when I'm stepping out, when I'm trying to get a better picture of who I am, what I have to say and what's going on in the world, that I feel like I get more direction back from my work, that I again find my voice and what I really want to say. Everything flows from this space, which is why I try and get as deliberate as possible about creating as much of this space as I can in any given year. And one of the most deliberate ways I do that is to take retreats, to take 3 or 4 days, whatever I can afford, to step out of the daily run of my life and to create mental space where my mind can actually finish its thoughts. It's crazy how often in our day-to-day we start thoughts that we don't actually finish because an email comes in or someone needs something from us, or we're throwing media or stimuli in our face the whole time and cutting these thoughts off and creating these unfinished threads or strands. Retreat for me is an opportunity to step out of that frantic pace of things and create space and time for my brain to actually run every thought it has through to its conclusion, because I think that is the space where direction and vision are born. Let me give you a really practical example, and it's something you might be interested in because I got the direction for this channel from a retreat. If you've been following this channel for a while, you will know that I left my job as a pastor, priest, whatever you want to call it, about a decade ago. And one of the things I absolutely loved about that job was being able to speak to people week in and week out, to encourage them on their journeys and to inspire them to better. And I also was very deliberate about not speaking like somebody normally would in a church. I wanted to be more honest and more vulnerable than was often acceptable. I would be very honest about the doubts that I had, and I would share those. I would also be very honest about where I thought the institution of church was failing in society and really not doing the job it said itself it should be doing. Now, this obviously made me very unpopular with a lot of people. I would have emails every Monday morning after I spoke on a Sunday night from people in the church telling me that if I'm in leadership, I should not be talking about my doubts with people. That's not okay to do. I obviously disagreed. And the institution didn't really have a lot of time for me because I was quite critical of the fact that the institution of church often made the wrong things important. But it did make me very popular amongst people who were honestly seeking some kind of true spirituality that didn't have to turn a blind eye to all the inconsistencies. And I found that kind of communication really fulfilling. So I suppose it will come as no surprise to hear that I was eventually fired. I was told to stop saying the things I was saying, or I had to leave. And I said I couldn't because I believed in what I was saying, and so I was moved on. And the sad part about that for me was I lost my context to speak, to inspire and to encourage others, and obviously that made me sad. I then shifted all my energy and attention into photography and filmmaking, which was my next chosen career. I'd already been doing a little bit on the side, But I put in a lot of time to learn skills and to develop myself and build myself up to the point where I eventually started to get jobs in-house in companies and started to make some sort of success on the side with some freelance work as well. But my love of communicating and storytelling and encouraging others, and that skill set that I built up for myself over a decade of working for the church, was now sitting unused on a dusty shelf. Fast forward now to January 2015, and I decided that maybe I wanted to give YouTube a try. And at the time I was working shooting furniture and large products in studios, and I realized from when I started that job, because I went on YouTube looking for tutorials about how to do this better, there was very little out there showing you how to do it. And there was loads on tabletop photography with just a couple of lights, but not much to show you, for example, how to shoot a massive sofa or dining set in a studio with multiple lights. And so I decided I would do a series of videos teaching you how to shoot, cut out, add drop shadows, recolor fabrics, all the stuff that jobbing e-commerce photographers need to know how to do. And so I went about filming that little series. So I plowed 5 years worth of knowledge and experience into these 3 videos, and I put them out into the world. And they did okay. People passed them around, I think because they filled a hole and a gap that there was online, because not many people were talking about how to shoot and edit larger products. But when I watched them back, they just felt like cold, dry tutorials, and they just didn't excite me. And like a lot of people, I left those videos up, but I just pretty much abandoned the channel altogether. It was over a year later, in about May 2016, when I decided to take myself on a retreat, because I said I'd try and get deliberate about this sort of thing. And in my head, I thought, let's go to Snowdonia. It's beautiful, I've never been before, and I've seen pictures. I really want to go and just hang out there. So I booked a little eco cabin next to a river, and I decided that I'd try out some photography. I'm not really a landscape photographer, so I thought I'd give it a go. I had some ideas about trying out some techniques, and I thought maybe I'd film it as well, although I really didn't know what I'd do with it, because as I said, I'd already abandoned my YouTube channel and kind of given up on the idea. On the first day, I drove around and enjoyed the scenery, and I tried to take some landscape shots, but to be honest, they were pretty terrible. I had a drone, which was really exciting. It was brand new, and I decided to start flying it around and get some B-roll and testing out how to use it as well. So I got some shots, but I never had any intention about what I would do with those, really. And then the next day, the weather was a bit better, so I woke up early and went out and tried to get some landscape shots. I tried out some stitching, some pano stitching and some HDR stuff, because it was techniques I hadn't tried and I wanted to see what they would do. And I got the idea that maybe I should just film myself talking to camera explaining what I was doing, but I had no intention to really use that footage because I just felt tutorials were a bit dry having done the previous ones. But I got my little Sony RX100 Mark IV and I sort of talked through what I was doing to camera and stuck it back in the bag with really no intention or idea of how I would use that footage, but at least I had it. What I'm trying to do is, or this is what I'm thinking I'm trying to do anyway, and it's really a bit of an experiment for me, is I want to bracket my exposures, but I also want to stitch. And the reason for that is I'm trying to think, okay, I want as wide a shot as possible of this valley, and probably everywhere I'm going because I can crop in later. And I want as much information as I can get, both in dynamic range, but also in terms of megapixels in the image. So for every landscape shot I'm taking 9 shots. And best way to think of it is this. So you can see that I've got my camera set up. For the next 2 or 3 days, I just drove around and enjoyed the scenery. I took some more photos, I took some B-roll, and I just let my mind think. That was the whole point of going on the retreat in the first place. And I find often when I go away on retreats, my mind starts to go back to think about my past and to replay things. And I remember sitting in this little eco cabin in the Welsh mountains on the last night, and I think I was probably feeling a bit sorry for myself, and because I felt directionless and wasn't sure what to do, what the next step was, I was going back and thinking about my time with church and how much I enjoyed communicating, enjoyed speaking to people, enjoying encouraging them on their own journeys and being vulnerable about where I was messing up or how messy the journey was. And suddenly something snapped into clarity. I suddenly remembered that storytelling skill set I'd left on that dusty shelf, and I thought, what if I pulled it down? What if I joined it back together with this photography and filmmaking that I'm doing? And what if I could use it to create a channel with that tone that would make me happy, and it might connect with other people as well? I woke up early the next morning and I knew I only had till 11 o'clock. I needed to leave by then. And I frantically started to script out something rough, something about me going away and trying landscape photography, which wasn't what I was good at, being vulnerable with you about that, not trying to sound like an expert, being open about the messiness of the journey. And something about those words on the page felt true, and I felt excited about them. So because I had no time, I ran to 3 different locations, and they were all 50 meters walking distance from the cabin I was staying in, but they had different looking backgrounds. And I delivered 3 pieces to camera in those locations. I even changed tops for each of those shots so it would give me different options in the edit. And I got through it, all the while not sure if this was going to work, but excited that it just might. This couple of days could be a total fail. I could come away with nothing good to show for it, or worse, I could come away with images which I think are good, but when I post them online, professional landscape photographers are looking and tearing them to shreds because they're not great, and I couldn't tell. And there's a lot of ego wrapped up in that. I think when you're a professional photographer, you're really worried about posting anything online you can't control to every degree. You don't want to risk anymore. And I remember back when I was starting out in photography and I just got a camera, I was so excited. Even as I was talking to camera, it felt like coming home. It felt like, wow, this is something that I can do. It's true to who I am, to a skill set I've created. It comes out of who I am as a human being. It feels good and honest, and there might just be something in this. And from my YouTube stats, I can see that that was the first video of mine that a lot of you watched. And I hope that it set the tone in the fact that I was always going to be honest with you about how messy the journey can be. I'm not going to act like an expert who knows absolutely anything. I'm going to be honest with you about how difficult things can get. But I'm going to encourage you on your journeys and push you to keep going and to not give up when it gets difficult. And it was on those days in the Welsh mountains that the tone and the voice for this channel was set. And it all began with time spent alone, creating mental space for my mind to finish its thoughts. If it wants to go back and look at things or bring things back out of my past or remind me about who I am and what I have to offer, that's what it takes. Everything you're watching now came out of that retreat. This idea of retreat seems such a vital one that we've lost in our frantic modern world. I mean, every major spirituality around the world still practices this, from Native Americans who would send out their kids on vision quests to learn who they were and what they could bring back to the community, from holy men who separate themselves from society and live on the banks of the river Ganges, or Chinese hermits who used to go up into the mountains and spend time alone, and you'd often find the leaders in society would travel up into those mountains to find those hermits and to learn from them. You even had these amazing characters called stylites in Syria in the 400s who used to climb to the top of pillars and sit there for years at a time. One guy named Simeon climbed to the top of a pillar in 423 AD, and he stayed there until his death 37 years later. What an amazing picture of taking your time to get away from society and connect with something deeper. Whilst permanently separating myself off from society is definitely too extreme for me, the point still stands, and I want to be deliberate about taking even short periods of time to disconnect from society and the things that are keeping me busy, and to reconnect with myself and to finish my thoughts. These are the people that we seek out, that we want to hear from. These are the people that, because we know they've done that work, they've built that depth, they'll probably have wisdom to share with us and things that we need to learn from them. And that's why retreats are really important to me, because I know that I would run out of motivation, I would run out of ideas, I would run out of direction really fast if I didn't deliberately create that space. Perhaps you're feeling that lack of energy and that lack of direction, and you're not really sure what to do, or you don't have any motivations to take the next step, even if you knew what that next step was. Maybe it's time for a retreat. It doesn't have to be anything huge. It can just be you going away for a couple of days. It can just be you shutting down the normal run of the things you have to do, even if you can't afford to go away, and just stepping out, turning off the phone, taking some time to be on your own, read a book, catch up with yourself. But whatever you do, whether you're a photographer, a filmmaker, a writer, a poet, a painter, it doesn't matter. If you're feeling some kind of lack, I guarantee you the answer is to retreat in whatever way you can manage. With all this in mind, I think I've decided that I don't want to run photography workshops. What I want to do is to run retreats, and hopefully do this on a regular basis into the future if they work out, to just create space for people to come away and to reconnect with themselves. So to get the ball rolling on this, I partnered up with a talented friend of mine who is a veteran of these sort of retreats, and we've come up with something really special for June next year. My friend Vla, who you've already met on this channel in my food photography video, is starting his own retreats, and he's calling them Ulysse, in a nod to the myth of Odysseus and his journey back home. And I just love that idea, and I decided that us partnering together on my first retreat would be a great way to go. It's also important to say that this is a creative retreat generally, and you don't have to specifically be a photographer. You might be a filmmaker, or a writer, or a poet, or a painter, or you might not identify with any one of those individually, but you just want to get away and recharge your creative tank. You are also very welcome. We found a stunning spot in the Tuscan hills where you'll be able to relax, read a book, meet people on similar journeys, share your stories, take long walks, whatever it takes for you to step out and get some fresh perspective. On top of this, there will also be hikes and horseback riding. There'll be various optional forms of exercises, from running to yoga to 2 gyms which are on site. We'll be eating together and cooking together. There'll be wine tastings, documentary screenings in the evenings, excursions to some of the beautiful local towns in the area, and let's be honest, probably loads of relaxing by the pool. You'll also be able to book one-on-one sessions for me, which you can use however you choose. We can do a bit of life mentoring or talking through your journey so far or finding a direction for you going forward, or I can review your work or your images or however you want to use that time. And Vla will also be available for one-on-one sessions. He's a talented designer who works for a major international company, and if you want to sit down with him and talk through your branding, your logos, how you present yourself on your websites and social media, and whether it meshes with your personality, he'll be able to give you some consultation about how you're presenting yourself to the world. However, everything on the program is going to be optional, and I mean that. I don't enjoy going on group retreats where every second of every day is scheduled. If you want to spend all your time in bed catching up on sleep, you are welcome to do that. If you want to take long walks on your own and just disconnect for days at a time, you can do that. Catch up on reading, talk to people. The point is, you design the time the way you want to do that, because it's your retreat and you will know best. This is the first retreat Vla and I will be running together like this, and I couldn't be more excited. He's exactly the right kind of person to do this with, especially with his experience. Plus, he speaks fluent Italian, which in this case is obviously very convenient and helpful. But hopefully, if this goes well and there's a demand for it, we will be doing at least one of these a year, maybe even 2, and each time in different parts of the world with slightly different flavors and emphasis. I'll leave a link down below to the website so you can go through and read up all the details and book your space if you'd like to attend. I just warn you that spaces are very limited, so if you're really keen on attending, book as early as you can so you don't miss out. But the point still stands. Even if you can't attend a retreat that I'm running, if you're any kind of creative and you're serious about finding that direction for your work, take space in whatever way you can manage. Find a way to retreat. My hope for you, in whatever space you manage to take for yourself, is that you would reconnect with who you are and what you have to say, that you would allow your mind to finish its thoughts, and that would create a wealth of ideas, that you would be creatively refreshed, and that you would leave with a clearer direction off into the future. It's how I found the direction and the voice for this channel, the one that's true to me, and it may be how you find the direction for the next phase in your journey.
I'm ready to fall.